every single time I went on one of these podcasts who were talking how OF is the worst thing ever. It's the downfall of society. These women are 304s and horrible. Every time I went on, my money went because their fan base hates us, but they're also attracted to us.
A lot of men that I see saying, oh, well, she's going to totally regret this down the road when she has kids. No man is ever going to take her seriously.
It's a revenge fantasy, especially these types of men. They desire these women that typically don't desire them back. And on top of that, these women hold more social capital. They're typically more successful. And so they want the other shoe to drop. It's kind of like, because you got here in a way that I think is unfair, or I think is stigmatized, or you broke the rules to get somewhere, you must not be happy, or you're going to pay for this later. And all of those people, you need to stop for a second and think, what if they don't? What if they're just happy? What if they just go on with their lives? What if they find like-minded people and they have healthy, flourishing relationships? And if that bothers you and you really want to tear them down, or you want to sit there and hope that they're going to be miserable later, it shows me you're miserable.
If somebody says that they feel that it's immoral what you do, do you push back on that, or do you just accept that for what it is?
If you're just saying that because you're upset, or because this is what's been told to you, and I go, okay, why? And if you can't explain why, or you can't explain why you believe the things you believe, then it's like, okay, cool, bye.
Welcome, everyone, to the Beyond the Cover podcast. My intent with creating this podcast was to provide a platform where men can speak openly about their journeys with mental health without fear of judgment while doing so. While I, the host, or you, the listener, may not agree with everything or anything that a certain guest says for that matter, my focus is not to decipher what is right or wrong. Rather, it's to gain a better understanding of why somebody thinks and acts the way that they do. And with this understanding, we will begin to make better sense of our own lives and the world around us. So join me as we open the books into these men's journeys and dissect the pages within. Jazmen Jafar, welcome to Beyond the Cover.
Thanks for having me.
This is going to be a unique discussion for me because I have not had somebody in your position yet be on the show.
Okay.
And in fact, most of my guests, I've tried to basically pull people from all different backgrounds. The whole point of me having these discussions is to really just open up people's minds to different perspectives and narratives and different things that people are doing and why they do them, and what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, and dispelling rumors and really just getting a better sense. Again, I heard this phrase once where someone said, if you're gonna put out a fire, you should ask a firefighter, not a lawyer. That makes sense. Like, ask the people that have experience, right? Instead of just like listening to somebody that's never put their hand on a fire hose.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of lawyer,
I was about to say,
do you still have your?
Yes.
You can still practice law.
Yes.
Okay.
So I have my license active, but I don't practice day to day. But like technically, like I could represent you right now.
Okay. What do you specifically represent clients in? Like what?
Well, when I was working, like when I was practicing day to day, I did estate planning, guardianships, conservatorships, elder law, and like special needs. So those were like the areas I mostly was practicing in, because my mom also has an estate planning attorney, is an estate planning attorney and has a firm in another state. So yeah, we can talk more about why I made the very unconventional career shift that I did. But yes, I'm also a lawyer.
So we will dive into that right now. So on the cover, you are a top creator on OF, because I can't say the name, I guess, for the algorithm purposes, which I'm always learning something new here. But you're top 0.03%, which means that you're basically the top.
I do well.
You do very well.
Not as well as, what did you see that Sophie Rain girl over the weekend?
48 million or something?
Not there yet, but maybe one day.
48 million, and she's like 20 years old.
She's 20 years old. It's crazy in 1 year.
Yeah.
In just 1 year.
It's unfathomable. She's making more than like high level athletes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And I mean, I saw some video where this I think she was another OF model creator that basically was like in shock when she handed her phone.
Yeah,
She's like, I won't say it, but you can look at it. And she was just like, I'm about to cry. And I saw it. I was like,
good for her. Good for her.
It's it baffles me. It blows my mind that amount of money is going into it, because I guess for me, I always thought, well, a lot of this content is free at this point. It used to be behind a paywall back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, my friend, had a Playboy magazine or whatever, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on that. And like the old days. And that was like how you would get access to content like this. And then it became, these different platforms that started to provide, free content, but then you'd have to pay for the premium. But now virtually a lot of these websites are all free. And so I find it interesting that there's men that are paying for it when there is free content. So This wasn't my original first question, but I guess since we're on this topic, why do you think men are willing to pay for a service such as this? What is it that's getting them to go down this avenue versus just traditional content that they can freely intake?
Yeah, I think that people, instead of just watching the free version where there's no connection, you don't know the person's personality or anything, if you look, generally a lot of the people that do the best on OF are people who are online personalities. So they're Twitch streamers, they showcase their personalities, and people kind of go for them. So an example is I get a ton of people because I have a very large Reddit profile where I just, post just sexy stuff. And I get a lot of people that are like, hey, I subscribed. I saw you on Reddit a lot, but then I heard you speak. And I love how smart you are. And I like your personality. So I get a ton of men who subscribe to me because of that other component.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a lot of men that are just bored with like the basic, okay, whatever. And not everybody. And then they want the personality. They want a person to go live and interact with them. So that interaction part is key. And I think that's mainly the reason that a lot of people go that route.
Makes sense. It's a connection point. So you feel, as opposed to me just looking at two random people on a screen, having fun. It's like now I'm actually interacting with the person that's creating this content.
Yeah.
Therefore, I get to have this personal interaction, and that to me is worth the $5 or $10 a month or whatever it is.
You're paying, yeah.
With your current audience, is it pretty spread out as far as the demographic of men that you get? I mean, I'm curious. I don't know the first thing about it. I mean, are you seeing one type of main person? Is like, if you had to basically just describe your typical viewer, I mean, are they someone that's, isolated, they're a loner, and they're like that struggles to find people to date, or are they married, or are they very affluent individuals that just have an abundance of money to be able to throw around wherever they please? Yeah. I mean, is it a widespread, or is it more? Yeah.
So before I started, I would have had all those similar stereotypes, like, oh, it's people who have struggle with relationships or finding, or women, or it's old people. Like I would have had all of those same assumptions. But once I started, it's not that way at all. I think OF themselves actually released their own stats on their users, and the majority, a lot of them are married, and a lot of them aren't people that are necessarily struggling or like incels. And I can say for me personally, I have a large audience that's very educated. Like even the way that they type in their messages to me, like perfect punctuation, excellent grammar, like great, versus like when I look at comments on like Instagram and stuff, like no one's using the correct form of your or their anything. So I do have a lot of the corporate types that are on my page. Age range, I'd say like mid-20s to mid-40s is probably like the main age range that I interact with, but it's a wide range. And also like out of the people that subscribe, I'd only say like 20 to 10% or even message you. So as to your point earlier, I think some people just want to see that specific girl because it like reminds them of like the girl next door, the girl in their class, or like, oh, lawyer, you could have been my colleague. It'd be interesting to see you naked. So that is definitely
a fantasy.
They're fulfilling a fantasy. And I think that's another thing that differentiates that from regular corn, to use that term, because people are like, no, I want to see this specific person, right? Like I noticed that whenever I bring up like, or when I on Reddit, when I post like, hey, what if you saw me at the office? Like a lot of people are interested in that lawyer fantasy, and other girls use different, whatever theirs is, or some people are really into the tattoos or whatever, and that's a big component of that. But I would say they're really normal. Now, there are some people that aren't, but I would say it's a minority for sure. A lot of them are just normal people that they're not like messaging you like in love with you. They're not like, hey, like I want to marry you. They're just like, hey, you seem cool. Can I get some of this content? Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what percentage men to women? I mean, do you even have a woman demographic?
I do. I have some couples. I'd say like a
Okay.
good amount of, not good amount, maybe like 10% couples and then like 1% just women.
Okay.
So largely men.
Largely, I mean, that somewhat tracks. I mean, I don't know. Would you even know if there's a creator out there that has, well, I know there's some male creators that probably, I don't know if their audience is primarily, I hear it's primarily though men.
Yeah, I would
like gay men,
so.
or I don't know if women are a major consumer of OF.
No, I do know male creators that their whole brand is having a bunch of collabs with female creators.
Okay.
And so then men will subscribe to them because they want to see those specific types of women or whatever with that one guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say largely the OF subscriber demographic is men.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the discussion around relationships. First, with some of your clients that you stated are married. I'm just curious on your opinion. Do you feel that consuming that content as a married man would be considered cheating?
I think if it violates the boundaries of the relationship that they have, then yes, whatever that looks like. So for some couples, yes. If you're doing it behind your partner's back, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that there's a lot more women than you would imagine that are like, whatever. Like, I don't mind if my partner watches corn.
Yeah.
So a lot of them actually are like, my girlfriend found you or whatever found you. And a lot of them sometimes even get off on it. So you never know. But obviously it's all about the people in the relationship and the boundaries that they set.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I like that. I think it's all about communication.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that front. On the topic of relationships with you in particular, I'm curious if you were to be in a relationship. I don't know if you are currently or not. So if you are, then you can answer that as if you are, or if you're not, then would you continue doing OF if you were in a relationship?
Yes.
Okay.
I would. I mean, if you're meeting me now, I'm not in a relationship. You would know that this is what I do for a living. And if you had a problem with that, I don't think we'd just be compatible at all. Now, if I wouldn't, I'd be okay with not filming with other men. If I'm in a relationship, I would either do solo content. Ideally, the person would be down to film with me. And, I'd obviously compensate them for that. And that would be my ideal. But if they were like, hey, I'm not comfortable on camera, I'm okay with you doing OF, but I'm not comfortable with you filming with other men, I would be okay with that. But I wouldn't be okay with a guy who's like, I don't want you to do OF, because I wouldn't be interested in that kind of guy anyway. Yeah.
So, and yeah, that also makes a bunch of sense. So has it been hard dating in general? With this being your career, has it been frustrating, challenging? Just, I mean, if you come to terms with it, you're like, okay with it, it doesn't bother you whatsoever. I mean, what has this done with dating to you? And I'm just curious on your thoughts around it.
Yeah. Honestly, not much. I've always, even before I started OF, so I'm actually a pretty unique case, because before I started OF when I was like 26, I'm 29 now. And I didn't have social media at all before. Like, I didn't have Instagram, didn't have anything. And even then I would not be into guys or want to date guys who had different values than me and were very much like, I remember one time I was with a guy and he was like, oh, it's so great that you're not like showing off your body on Instagram like all these other girls. Ghosted him. I'm just not into that at all. And so
I've heard that
also
a lot, yeah.
Because my experience may be a little different than other women, because I also am a lawyer. And when you meet me like in person and you don't know, you wouldn't necessarily assume that I'm on OF. So I do find that a lot of times when I date, a lot of guys are just interested in me and they just don't mind the OF part of it. And if they did, then but I haven't run into that problem. I come from kind of like an academic background, and I feel like, especially in higher education, we don't have the stigma surrounding sex work is not as stringent as other populations. Yeah. So I've just never had most men are like, oh yeah, I would do the same thing. So that's primarily been my experience.
Yeah. So the way I'm hearing it is basically your career may push away people, but it's the wrong people.
Exactly.
So you look at it like, yeah, if you got a problem with it, I'm not going to dwell upon it. It's just we don't match energies.
Exactly. Like an example I use is a lot of men don't like, sometimes men are intimidated by women who make more money than them or are more educated than them.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was going to law school, people were never like, you're going to eliminate a portion of men who aren't going to be as educated as you. It's like, okay. Nobody says that. But with this, they go, oh, some men aren't going to want to date you. I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't want to date those men anyway. There's enough men that still want to date me.
Yeah.
And those are the men I'd want to date even if I wasn't doing OF. So it doesn't really eliminate any contenders that I would have entertained in the first place.
Yeah. And I can totally understand that viewpoint. I think for me, the experiences that I've had with reality television and being polarizing to some degree, I pushed away a lot of people based on how I was perceived on television, based on the things that I was posting after television, which wasn't anything raunchy, but just the allegations and that were false that I dealt with. And, there was a lot of people around me that said, the more that you become this kind of person or that you go down this path, you're going to be basically ostracizing yourself from many individuals that might have been interested in you that no longer are. And that was hard for me at first because I felt that the dating pool did narrow down. When the reality was, though, I'm like, yeah, the larger the dating pool seems, it just ends up being more overwhelming. The reality is that, I am basically what's meant for me. The more that I push out my authentic energy, I'm going to attract that back. And then whatever, if I continue to throw stuff out there and put out more content, I'm naturally just going to repel what's not meant for me.
Yeah.
And so then it became, in having self-love and self-confidence, I said, I don't care. Like my DMs are dried up more because people know who I am. There's really at this point, everything I've done is out there.
Yeah.
And so it's like, there's really no surprises with me. It's like people, there's things that I do that it's like, this is just my vice, or these are the things I enjoy doing. And I'm not perfect, but at this point, it's all out there.
Yeah. You don't need 100% of people interested in you. What are you going to date like billions of people?
I think we want to, the fallacy of the mind is that we want to believe that we can walk in a room and have 9 out of 10 people look at us and potentially be interested in us.
That might be different for men and women too, though, because I think since women were like inundated with attention, I am perfectly fine with eliminating 50, 60, 70, whatever percent. Because again, I probably wouldn't have been interested in that pool anyway.
Yeah. No, I think part of it, there's a lot that's ego that's involved.
Yeah.
I don't know if men have a bigger egos than women. I think we maybe just express it differently.
Yeah, I agree.
But I do think that men are more physical focused in general. And so for us, we place more focus on appearance, the appearance of our significant others and the appearance of ourselves as well. And so I think that's where, we may, as we walk in a room, we are paying attention to people looking at us and versus how they're looking at other people around us. And are we seen as, someone that people want to, that they're attracted to, or are we basically being lost in a room full of people and no one's paying attention? I think that can tie into also too, though, is that person a people pleaser? How did they grow up? That's how I grew up. And so there was a point where I, was chasing that validation. And so it sounds like you're in a healthy place where you're just like, I do what I do. And I'm confident in who I am and I don't need this validation from the outside. So it's a very healthy mindset to be in. And, because I think there's a lot of men that I see when I click on an OF creator's page and I read the comments, and there's a lot of them that are saying, oh, well, she's going to totally regret this down the road when she has kids, and her kids are going to, not be able to handle this. And like, she's basically, no man is ever going to take her seriously. And nobody wants her. And so, she makes her money now, but she's going to end up being alone in the long run.
It's a revenge fantasy. There's a lot of literature on this recently too, that people, especially with women, especially these types of men, they desire these women that typically don't desire them back. And on top of that, these women hold more social capital. They're typically more successful. And so they want the other shoe to drop. Oh, well, you're miserable. Oh, well, I've even seen this with the Sophie Rain thing, like people posting, well, at least I have dignity and you don't. Like, it's kind of like, because you got here in a way that I think is unfair, or I think is stigmatized, or you broke the rules to get somewhere, you must not be happy, or you're going to pay for this later. And all of those people, you need to stop for a second and think, what if they don't? What if they're just happy? What if they just go on with their lives? What if they find like-minded people and they have healthy, flourishing relationships? If that bothers you, then the problem is you. People living a different lifestyle that you need to accept that they may be happy that way. And if that bothers you and you really want to tear them down, or you want to sit there and hope that they're going to be miserable later, it shows me you're miserable, because I think people who aren't miserable don't behave this way.
Yeah. Very well said. Yeah. And I think, well, so tying this in, so yesterday in preparation for our conversation, I always like to just, like check in and look at someone's Instagram and see like what they're currently actively doing. And you had a story that you posted, and this story entailed a study that it was up in the title, posing the question, or making the statement that negative attitudes towards promiscuity is a risk reduction strategy for low value men.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I mean, that was a very provocative title out the gate. So I'm already, my first thought is any man that's reading this is that holds these beliefs, that's in your caption or your comments saying you're never going to be happy, never find a man. They're preying on your downfall. It's going to tick them off. That's a very provocative title. Would you say that mindset that of the revenge factor? I mean, what percentage of men that are consuming your content hold that belief, or do none of them? Is it completely separate for who comments on your page versus who your clientele is? Are they completely separate, or do they mix?
So I kind of, like a year ago, I started going on a lot of these. I don't know if you're familiar with the Red Pill, but like podcasts like Fresh and Fit, or the whatever podcast, kind of like that Andrew Tate sphere. And
okay, so it's like, are they just podcasts meant to, I mean, basically talk about controversial topics?
No, like Fresh and Fit is a podcast to show men the truth about women, and to show,
so
you know what I mean? So so it's already a combative environment. And I kind of, because I'm pretty good at combating that rhetoric, especially because they usually bring on like 18-year-old girls who don't know what they're doing. And then they'll take a clip and they're like, oh, she's so stupid. So I was like, wait a minute. So I went on and I started coming back at them and doing it well. So I gained a lot of traction from that. And a lot of their subscribers or their fan base came to me, flooding my comments with hate, but also buying my content. Every single time I went on one of these podcasts who were talking how OF is the worst thing ever. It's the downfall of society. These women are 304s and horrible. Every time I went on, my money went because their fan base hates us, but they're also attracted to us. So she's disgusting.
Subscribe.
Exactly. Oh my God, I hate her. $5.99,
that's a deal.
Yeah. So their fan bases, it's all men. It's all sexually frustrated men. And they are like a good subscriber base to go to OF. So maybe mine's a little skewed because of that, but I would still say like 80 to 90% are normal. But I do notice sometimes they'll have the same username. And I noticed that like on my OF, they'll be like, hey, you're really wonderful. And then in my Instagram comments, they'll be like, oh, this is horrible. It's like they have a cognitive dissonance. And it's those types of men that you see that they'll subscribe, they'll consume the content, then they'll delete everything, then they'll come back next week. Like they're not happy with themselves. They're dealing with this internal struggle. And that's why you see a lot of these places are like, oh, I'm so addicted. I'm addicted to this. And a lot of that's moral incongruence because they want to be one way and they portray themselves as one way. They'll even police other men. That's a big one, is you'll see someone like, you look pretty today. And I'm like, simp. Like, she's not going to get with you, bro. Like, they try to do that. But those are the same men that are also subscribing to the content and then feeling guilty about it and then coming back and leaving and coming back and leaving. So you do see that demographic really struggle with it. Whereas men that are just normal and like happy with themselves, they'll be like, hey, I'm here. And they don't feel ashamed for it.
If you had to pick either a net positive or net negative outlook on men and how you view them after starting OF, which category would you fall into? I mean, as far as like your outlook on men and their mindsets in general, has it swayed you to where you're like, actually, now that I've seen, men and how they interact and stuff with me, and also whether it's like in my direct messages or whether it's in the comments, like I have more hope for men or less hope for men, or I look at men in a more positive light or negative light. If you had to lean on which way?
Yeah. Before I started, I had a positive view on men in general, and I still think I maintain that view. Now, I will say that being in this space, especially a lot of these podcasts, they've gained a lot of traction because I do think there is a little bit of a male crisis for a multitude of reasons. They're more isolated, having less friends, a lot of things, right? Women are outpacing them in education and other things. And so that's kind of what I think has caused the rise of the Andrew Tates and these like masculine, whatever, bro podcasts.
Yeah.
So I've been really interested in that. And sometimes I do see that. And so I do make it a point, and I've like tried to do research, read certain books to try to understand this problem and also make sure that I'm not just owning these guys, but I'm also trying to find a way to help these men or to have a direction for them to go. So even on my own OF page, like most girls in my bracket, they use chatters. They don't actually interact with the men themselves.
Yeah, I had to think like Sophie Rain in particular. I'm like, is she actually answering all these DMs?
Most of them are not. But I make it a point that I do, even though I lose a ton of money because of that, because I'm not there all the time. They have like, a lot of these agencies, they're like, yeah, you give them a percentage and they make sure every DM is answered within 20 minutes by some man in Bangladesh or wherever they're paying. And I think that's wrong. I think that's fraud. And I don't want to do that to these men. So I take the time to answer those messages myself. I also implement boundaries. Like if I see somebody that's exhibiting unhealthy behaviors, like they're too obsessed with me or they're trying to buy too much content at once, I'll be like, hey, you need to take a step. I'm not here to just milk men and exploit men for money. And I think that's one of the reasons I feel so good about my job and I like my job so much. And it's also because I do respect men. I know there's a lot of OF girls, and I'm not trying to throw anyone in particular under the bus, that are just like, oh, whatever. They're just in it for the money. They don't care that these men get scammed. They want to milk them for everything they have. They'll even falsely, portray as they're interested in them back, and they'll just to try to get the money from it. And I'm vehemently against that.
Yeah, but that happens in many different industries outside of this OF. I could think of the bar industry in particular, and some of those servers that I've noticed. They're very good at it out here, but when I first came out here, I was like, oh my gosh, this beautiful woman's giving me all this attention. No, she just wanted me to go buy a table later that night. So people do it, and I at first I became upset, angry. I'm like, how dare she, use me just to try to get my money? But then I kind of took it back on myself and thought, well, for one, she's just hustling. She's running her business. That's what she's choosing to do. And it is what it is. Like, I also need to have... there's no fraud involved in what you're saying. But when people say, you pay to talk to me, and then you're talking to some man there's a distinguishment.
I feel like that to me is a different level. If you just put a little disclaimer, hey, by the way, you're not really talking to me, fine. Yeah. But you're conning people in a way where if just being flirtatious, like, I'll be flirtatious. I'll be like, hey, baby, like whatever. But that's still me. I'm not lying.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was, I guess at the time I thought it was a little fraudulent because I began to say like, hey, oh my gosh, I want you to come out and have drinks with me tonight. And I responded to one. I said, are you working tonight? She's like, yeah, I am. And I was like, and I didn't respond.
Yeah.
But that was more because I just realized like, it is just like, it's a hustle. She's looking to, I guess, make a percentage off of that table that night. That's her job, is to attract clientele that'll pay, that bring in more money to the bar.
Yeah.
And so, her being flirtatious, is it wrong? It's like, well, no, probably it's more so me, my ego being upset with the expectation that, oh, I thought you were giving me attention because you liked me, not because it's just strictly business.
But there's a line that there's a line to like, you being flirtatious is one thing, but like being like, oh, I'm super interested in you, I really want to be, like, just completely lying or misrepresenting your intentions to a certain degree, I think that crosses the line of unethical. So.
You could say, that's where there's a sense of like an issue with morality, but then again, I guess it comes down to the perspective of the individual in the situation, right? Like, what I might think is immoral is not what you think is immoral.
Exactly.
And I'm curious with individuals that come to you, and because you do take the time sometimes. I think I told you you've come up on my Explore page, and we had met prior, and so like you'd come up on my page, and I saw that you were interacting with people, whether it was like on the podcast themselves, these Red Pill podcasts, with you directly, firing back at some statement they've made, but like you seem to take the time to also like try to educate, but also like you're like, I got time today, like I'm gonna actually say, here's the real reason why you're so upset right now. If somebody says that they feel that it's immoral what you do, do you push back on that, or do you just accept that for what it is? I mean, do you feel that can you accept that as like, okay, that's your truth?
Yeah,
or
no,
do you still,
for sure.
Okay.
But I like people to have critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're just saying that because you're upset or because this is what's been told to you, then I'm going to push back. And I'm going to push back anyway, because I love the marketplace of ideas. I like debating. I like to hear other people's perspective. I don't want to be around people who just agree with me. Mm-hmm. I'm weird. Like if I post something and I don't get a lot of like pushback, I'm bored. Like I want people, especially because some of the things that people say are narratives that are mirrored by or accepted by a large portion of the population. Mm-hmm. Great. Let me push back on it.
Yeah.
But I don't think morality is objective in any way. So because of that, I can't say that they're 100% wrong or they're 100% or I'm right. But there are people who, because of, their religious beliefs or their religious background, they think what I'm doing is immoral. Great. I don't subscribe to that religious belief. So we're going to have a disagreement. But if you're just like, you're a and there's no, and I go, okay, why? And if you can't explain why, or you can't explain why you believe the things you believe, then it's like, okay.
You probably believe that then they're withholding something. Like either you're not telling me the actual truth, or you just haven't actually put the thought into it. And so there is something there. There's a reason for everything. You just haven't taken the time to dissect.
Yeah. And so I'll take the time to dissect it for them. So that's kind of
okay. So
my
dissect
approach.
This one for me. I've heard this quite a bit said amongst people that I've been around. And I'll even say that I've sometimes, I've made this statement.
Uh-huh.
So I'm curious as you dissect this as to, and there could be a multitude of reasons, but when you hear this mindset of, I don't think I could ever date someone that's an OF creator because I believe that, not only is it immoral, but I don't want my, friends and family to be able to see something that I believe should be only for my eyes to see.
Yeah.
And that's, not something that I'm willing to give on. When you hear something along those lines being said that way, is there any point at which you would push back and try to?
Not on that.
No.
Because this is your preference in dating, right? If a girl came to me and she's like, I don't like men that are, really into sports because for whatever reason. I think when you're dating, you can date whatever kind of person that you want. If someone comes to me and they're like, I won't date, let's say you're liberal, I won't date a conservative. I'm not going to be like, no, you should, right? I don't think that would be the way to get into a prosperous and fulfilling relationship. So if that's something that bothers you, that's completely fine. But then when you go and say, no man would do this, that's where I have an issue, because now you're wrong.
Well, now, right? Absolutes, you'll always be wrong.
Yeah, absolutes
There's always an exception.
Wrong. Or even saying most, like you don't know most men. What are you saying, right?
Yeah.
But when you make a preference, when you have a preference for yourself, that's completely fine, right? Like I would be uncomfortable with this. Great. There are women who are like, I'm uncomfortable with my man having female friends. I think that's nuts. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have that. But I'm not going to tell her, no, you need to change. You need to be okay with this. You need to be okay with that. There are so many different people in the world, and you can find somebody who aligns with your what you want to set as boundaries in the relationship. But when you start to put your own preferences and try to put that on greater society, that's when I have an issue.
Yeah.
So that would be my answer to that. But if you're just talking about yourself, okay, cool, bye.
Yeah.
Like that's all. That's.
Yeah, you don't lose sleep on it. You don't even probably even judge them any differently.
No.
Okay, that's your preference.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
And that's where the end of that thought
process.
process.
If he's like, I wouldn't date brunettes, it'd be the same thing. Yeah. Like whatever.
It is interesting because the way that you related that to politics and said like if somebody said I would never date someone who's liberal, I've heard that as well, and I think that's absolutely ridiculous because I'm like, who cares? Like, people are going to have differences of opinion, right? And so if you can align on one side all the way down the ticket, as far as you hold all those beliefs that the left or the right side believes, I question if you're thinking for yourself. I mean, because I don't fall. I mean, me personally, and again, maybe somebody does. Maybe somebody literally says, oh, on these 5 issues on the right, I fall in all these categories. Therefore, like, yes, that's the way that I choose to believe. But I sometimes think, I'm like, most people might say, like, I believe a couple things over here, a couple things over here. And I think that's healthy. And like, as I've kept a more open mind, it's why I'm not political. I mean, I don't get into it because I'm like, I believe some stuff over here. I believe some stuff over here. And I think it's about finding the common, middle ground. It's not like everyone wants to have something be far left or far right. And it's like, yeah, but that's not healthy. Like it's healthy when you find the balance of we can agree to disagree, because I'm not going to agree on everything with you. And I'm also not going to likely disagree on everything with you.
Yeah, but would you want to date somebody who's super far, like you probably wouldn't.
No,
it probably
me personally,
wouldn't be great,
I like,
right?
I want the open-minded individual.
Exactly.
I want the balance, the middle ground.
But if somebody that's super Catholic or super religious and they're super down the board, they don't believe in no-fault divorce, like all the stuff that they believe now, I wouldn't, and they're like, I wouldn't date somebody who doesn't subscribe to this. I would think you probably shouldn't. You probably shouldn't, as a Catholic, pro-life, pro-family, don't believe in divorce, anti-contraception person, go date somebody like me.
Yeah.
I don't think that's like something that we should even be encouraging. I think people should find people who align with them.
Yeah.
Because that is a big way to, that is a big contributor to a successful relationship.
Yeah.
It is. And as we're getting older, I think a lot of people are realizing that, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't just go date, so I was like, no, love will win at the end. No, you need to be compatible.
Yeah.
And so if there's a person who feels like very, territorial about their partner, doesn't want other people to see them. There are some men who don't even like when their women or their girlfriends or their partners dress a certain way. I wouldn't want to date those men, but some women are okay with that. Some women believe in, I just did Jubilee, the YouTube channel. They do like the middle grounds and they do like all those little...
I've heard the name, but I don't know if
so I just did a middle ground, like feminist versus trad wives.
Okay.
And I was obviously on the feminist side. And those women, like, they're completely living a different lifestyle and that's fine for them. Until they say, no, all women should be doing this. All women shouldn't be going to work. All women need to have children. All women need to be at home. Now I have an issue with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I am trying really hard to break away from absolutes because the reality is if you're using an absolute, I think it's often ego-based. Your ego's jumping in to try to prove a point to somebody, just to overpower them, and realizing it's like, well, now you know what you've done is you've actually weakened your argument, because I'll come out with a study that to combat this. And even if I find, all I need to find at this point is 1%.
Yeah.
Or one person. And now all of a sudden I can sit here on semantics and I've seen people do this and it's like, okay, so 1%. It's like, well, okay. But again, like, the words matter.
Yeah.
So either they do or they don't. So if you're going to tell me like all, then it means 100%, right? And we've gotten really loose with this as a society. And I think it's just an overall sense of laziness with the culture in general and the English language and how we can say.
Well, you're in an echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
So you have audience capture. So I noticed this a lot with even podcasts, like political podcasts. Well, there'll be like a Candace Owens saying, when you act like this, no man is going to want to marry you and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, all she says is, we're losing the culture war. People have lost their minds. People are idolizing these types of girls. It's like, well, which one is it?
Yeah.
Because obviously the whole reason you have a show is to combat a large part of the population that thinks like me, including men, including women. So you can't in one vein say like, oh, you got everybody hates you. Everyone thinks you're crazy. And on the other side, be like, oh my God, the world's gone crazy. Like the whole purpose of your show is to combat the more popular worldview, which is mine.
Yeah. And nowadays extremism prevails in all aspects of, industry as far as the level of success. As I've found, it's been actually something I've been grappling with, truthfully, because I want to, leave my own impact, but I'm a pretty calm guy for the most part, not too dramatic unless you put me on reality television. But like when in my real life, I'm pretty much like what you see is what you get. I'm not crazy. I'm not going to be the guy that's jumping up on a table and doing something wild. I might have the occasional like dance off moment where I'm in a club or at a wedding and I've had a couple drinks and I'm letting loose. But for the most part, like no one's going to see me all of a sudden, be parading down the street one day with some crazy outlook and screaming it to the mountaintops and doing something extreme. Like I'm pretty much like pretty centered and balanced in general. But what I find is like that doesn't lead to like growth on social media.
For sure.
Social media is all about the extremes.
Yeah.
And so the hard part is like, well, I want to make an impact, but I also like want people to realize that living in the extremes, in my opinion, is never going to be healthy. Because when you're looking at the extremes of like, okay, let's use this from a guy's perspective. I'm looking at all these creators and these people in corn that have this used to happen to me when I used to watch all that stuff, when I was younger. And I would look for a girl that has, that's more curvy and then more curvy and more curvy. And before I knew it, I'm like, if I'm on a video and she's not as curvy as the last one I saw, I'm nexting to the next video. Well, you can't do that in real life.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden I'm talking to a girl and, oh, sorry, she's not as curvy as like what I'm seeing. And so my mind's only trained to want this one thing.
Yeah.
Right. And it wasn't healthy. Now all of a sudden I have this
I agree.
very unrealistic expectation of that every woman should look like this. And otherwise I can't do it, because this is what I've trained my brain. It's like, well, you have trained your brain because you're hitting next to the next and so instead of having to, you can't hit next if someone comes over and you're intimate with them and all of a sudden, they take off their clothes and it's like, oh, well, she's not as curvy as what I saw online. So now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can't just next that.
Yeah.
It's like, this is my reality. And I started to see it impact the way that I was interacting in my, intimate life.
And then think about even with viewpoints, sorry to interrupt you,
but
with people, the algorithms are meant to feed you the things that make you angry, that make you disillusioned. So you get more of it because you stay on it longer. Yeah. And so I remember I grew up in Oregon where it was I went to a very left, I would say, college. And I remember being 18, 19, and I'm like, well, half the country can't be evil. It can't be, that's crazy. What 50% of the country is just racist, all of it. It doesn't make sense. These are really nice people. So, but you do see a lot of people start going into that. Oh, these people want to, force women to give birth and these people are this and they want to get rid of anyone who's different than them. And then those, it radicalizes people. So I do think that the internet has done a really great job of radicalizing people that are susceptible to it. And a lot of that is young men, young disillusioned men who are now getting radicalized by these red pill, black pill, incel forums that are, because I remember even before I did OF, I was really, when I learned about the incels on the internet, I became really interested. I'm weird. I like going on deep dives and figuring out people. I have a bachelor's in psychology. So that was another thing I was going to potentially pursue. So I'm really interested in that. And you would see these men on these forums hey, I'm feeling really down. I feel like girls don't like me. Da, 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 da. And then people would just comment, yeah, that's just life. They all suck. You better accept it. It's this is not helpful, but this seems to be the only community that they feel a part of this community, and then they just get radicalized. What is it? The 3 ends of radicalization: need, network, narrative. And I think online you do see a lot of that festering.
Yeah. Yeah, these people have a lack, and so they have a need that they're trying to acquire. They then find the network.
And then the network tells them the narrative.
And then now they've been conditioned.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where, unfortunately, again, nowadays with the algorithms are again set up for the extremes, right? The reality television is set up for the extremes. They don't want a lukewarm love story. They want a chaotic one, right? They want the most dramatic person and most dramatic season ever. And I get it because it's what sells. I don't know if it's even possible at this point. I mean, I guess it takes longer to build, but it's can you find success on being, in the balance in the middle? Can you find the success on social media? I often question that. I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think that somebody can find success by holding it could be this or it could be this? Or do you think that nowadays with the ways the algorithms are set up, the large majority, it's you have to pick a side. Otherwise your success is going to be stunted.
So for me, I love, for instance, I love the Lex Fridman podcast. And and it's a 4-hour podcast. There's no crazy clips or extremes coming out, even though he obviously interviews very controversial figures like Putin. And he's found a lot of success. I do find even a lot of the channels that I watch, one thing I notice is sometimes the title will be super crazy, blah, 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 destroyed by, and then when I click on it, it'll actually be sometimes reasonable. So sometimes I think it's unfortunately thumbnails and that hook need to be kind of extreme, but sometimes the actual content or what you're saying can be reasonable and that will still resonate with people. Because I think there are more people like us than there are these extremes. And they're probably I'm sick. This is all so crazy that I do think there's definitely space for a more reasonable voice. But you still have to, I think the caveat to that is you still have to have a message. You still have to have something you're fighting for. You still have to have something you're pushing that you are passionate about pushing and that you are very animated in doing. But you don't have to be demonizing anyone necessarily. Although sometimes that does work. A lot of the time.
And I think sometimes it's also too just moderates, people in the balance are just quiet. They because they're not riled up one way or another. They're not the ones tweeting online. They're not the ones that are jumping into someone's comments and telling them I'm preying on your downfall. They're basically just oh, okay.
And what kind of audience do you want? Do you want a smaller audience?
I don't want the extreme.
You want the smaller audience that's reasonable, where you can actually say what you believe and not have them completely turn on you. Like you said, I'm like that too. Let's say you are conservative, but you believe in vaccines or whatever. Now your audience, like, I would say this has happened to a lot of big political pundits too, like Ben Shapiro, and then his audience like hates him because, oh my God, right? Because they get into these cults almost. And I almost think you protect yourself from that if you're just reasonable from the start and you don't just try to get like the only thing you should care about is not views.
Yeah.
You should also care about the quality of the audience that you're curating.
Right.
And I think that will just be far more fulfilling, because I do notice with creators that do just try to get the views, then they have this audience that's like horrifying and they hate their job. They're like depressed. They're constantly scared. They're scared their audience is going to turn on them.
I have to do something even more extreme this time because that's why my audience is following me. So what can I do today?
Or even if I don't believe this, I have to carry it.
And now I'm not authentically myself. And now I'm repelling people that actually would be attracted to me, but because I'm pushing out this narrative that I believe this when I don't. And now
it's
I feel
part
trapped
of being
into
like
that
liked,
category.
Right? It's also being like, so I gained a lot of traction for going on these podcasts as a sex worker and combating some of their rhetoric. And then I get a bunch of people, like women that are really interested in me now. But then there'll be something where I don't agree. Like, well, I can't think of something like women in sports, something like that. And they're waiting for me to agree with them. They're waiting for me. And I'm like, but I don't. And I'd rather do that now than later when I amass this big audience that now I'm like, fuck, I'm going to get like, they're all going to hate me now, you know? Just be yourself from the start. I think that's a good way to protect yourself from that.
Yeah. And I mean, again, part of the reason why, I wanted you on here is because we've had prior conversations and you're very well spoken. And
Likewise.
I appreciate that. I think like, there needs to be a voice coming from your, from the creation side of what you do, because there are some of these OF creators that are young and just aren't, they're young. So their brains aren't fully developed. They're not at that emotional level of intelligence yet where they can actually stand up for themselves and combat this negative narrative. Because there's been certainly points in my life where I've caught myself with negative viewpoints on OF creators. Yeah. And there's times where I had to then say, I've looked back at it and I go, it was your ego.
Yeah.
You're just upset because they're not paying attention to you.
Or that they're making all this money.
And
you're waking up every morning and going to work and you're not,
Yeah. I mean, because people will say, okay, well, here's another one. It's super simple to be an OF creator. I mean, like you don't even work hard.
Yeah.
What's your combat to that? Like, I mean, how many hours? So I think most people are judging it how hard you work based on hours. So how many hours a day are you dedicating towards OF?
Depends on the day, but also because I do answer my own messages, I do take a lot more time to do that. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm working at the oil rig. Like I'm not going to lie to people and act like I'm not very, very lucky to be able to make my own schedule and work kind of the amount of hours I want. But I think, as you can say with social media, the more you put in, the more you put out, the more you get out of it. Yeah. So depending on how much you want, like when I need a break, I'll take a break. But these people that are really hustling every day, like streamers, I would say, yes, they make a lot of money from sitting in their rooms, but streaming like 10 hours a day is not easy at all. So I do think that there's a lot of work that goes into it, but also I think that with OF creators, there's a little bit of that, which a lot of people don't like the rich. People don't like people that are doing well. They'll be like, oh, it's easy money. Nobody likes easy money. I'm like, if you won the lottery, would you not take it now? Cause it's easy money. It's crazy. Yeah. But also because I do think of the internal built-in sometimes misogyny, especially from this group of men that also desire these women. Like you said, they're not paying attention to them. Yeah. And interestingly, before OF, people did not have this much of an issue with porn. It's only when women started having the control and profiting off of it themselves that they're like, how dare you put this behind a paywall and make a career and be more successful than me? That's not fair. Yeah. You're just taking your clothes off, blah, blah, blah. Right. So I think with OF in particular, it gets extra hate for that component of it. But I think in general, people hate people who are successful a lot of the time.
1,000%.
So
1,000%. I just had a comment and I blocked the individual because I'm like, I don't have to put up with this. This is my page.
Exactly.
So I love blocking people. I mean, I guess it somewhat gives me a sense of power. So it strokes that aspect of my, of my life where I'm like, guess what? Bye. You'll never see my stuff ever again because I'm never going to unblock you. Yeah. And so I do that. But this individual said, I'm preying on your downfall, homie. And I was just like, That's just so stupid.
I know.
And I started to type back. I was like, well, you're going to be praying for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Because it's never going to happen. And I caught myself. I'm like, that's unnecessary. Don't need to.
Is it unnecessary though? Because I'm one of the people who's like,
sure, I draw the line. I'm like, is it like, am I going to get through this guy? Because for one, I'm like, was that a constructive response? No, Clayton. Like the reality is he's going to be praying for a lifetime because you're not going to watch me fail because I already got past so many detrimental points in my life and I've come out looking okay. So I'm like, if you ask me, I'm not failing at this point. It's just like, I'll get knocked down. No doubt. I'm going to fall back into another valley, 1,000%. But I won't say I look forward to that because like hard moments are hard moments.
Yeah.
But guess who's going to get back up every time? Me. I've
and
already done it
guess
enough
who's not?
times.
The person who's complaining
the person
on the
that's complaining. That's likely
internet.
he's been knocked down.
Yeah.
And then I believe that. I'm like, people, I feel that I'm the trauma for a lot of people. I get a lot of hate online, not as much as I used to, but I think a lot of it was that when people saw me knocked down, watching me climb my way back up was like, it was traumatizing to them or triggering because they go, no, stay in the corner. Because how do you get out of that? Because their subconscious is like, well, how did he get out of that? But I can't get out of this. Like, no, he sucks. He's not winning. He's losing. And it's like, no, you're
exactly
lying
what
to
I
yourself.
said. Yeah, same
you're
thing.
You're lying to yourself.
You're a slut. You're this. You can't. You're supposed to be ostracized. You're supposed to have a scarlet letter. No, I wake up every day. I have friends that love me. I have no issues dating. I'm fine. And they're like, no, right?
They want to see you
suffer
20 years from now, still be single and like finally like be out there on the streets being like, spare me a penny. I can't. Or like, oh, what was me? Or like they want to see you
Meanwhile, I'm sure they'll be so happy with their hot wife and this is what they want, right? But I believe that, and I know people are different. Like I like the fiery blood sport type of shit. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't bother me when I get those comments. And so it doesn't bother me. But some people, it does impact their mental health and I'm totally fine with them. But I actually think giving these people negative reinforcement and clapping back at them because they're not used to it. Because most people just ignore it. It's like, oh, whatever. But when you actually clap back at them and you embarrass them, right? Like I'll have people on my page like, I wouldn't marry you. And I'm like, dude, look at yourself. Like I'm not.
Some people would say though that like that's, then is that mature of you to attack someone's looks? That's what somebody would say.
Well, the whole
in response.
But once you are trying to knock people down, like I don't believe in the whole, they go high, like low, we go high. I just don't subscribe to that.
So are you you subscribe to the fight fire with fire?
Yes, because I think that works. I do think it works because these people shut up real quick.
I don't disagree.
And I also think a lot of the ways that people learn is quite simple. It's like Pavlovian, like positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. What's like, right? And so these guys are so used to putting these comments in and getting that surge of dopamine. Like, I showed them. Mm-hmm. But when the person claps back, and now you're embarrassed. Now people are liking my comment more than yours, whatever. Mm-hmm. Now you have a little bit, next time you might be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't comment this because it's not going to give me that dopamine. Yeah. It's going to make me embarrassed. Yeah. And that's kind of, and because most people, it affects them or they get upset about it. I don't. So I feel like I'm a good person to do that with, right? Yeah.
It's a case by case basis.
Yeah, for sure. If
like
someone's
you're going to judge somebody based on their intellect, and this is how I'm going to respond. I'm either going to fight fire with fire, or maybe I can tell this person's really, really hurting right now, and I'm going to take the high road. Yeah. And whether or not you do that, you're not like, okay, all the time I'm fighting fire with fire. No. It's just like if you
usually I'm too busy. Usually I'm like, whatever.
And I like this because I feel like you're in a way tapping into your intuition where it's like, if I feel in my heart that I want to fight fire with fire today, then do it. Mm-hmm. And don't feel wrong about it. An example for me is like this woman that falsely accused me of becoming pregnant, made the whole thing up. Yeah. I have fought fire with fire a couple times with her. Mm-hmm. And I got a couple DMs with people saying like, I thought you were better than to stoop to this level. And, because I posted something about like an image of someone holding up a sign being like, she lied, said her name and then she lied. And I thought it was funny. So I posted it and people were like, I thought you were above this. And it's like, you know what? I'm gonna be a little petty. Yeah. Because I feel like it. Because like, you know what? I've tried to reason with her. I gave her an out. I wrote up a contract saying, if you sign this contract, I will act like it never happened and we'll just move on. And then you and I will go our separate ways and we'll never make this bigger than what it has to be. And she didn't sign it. So I was like, when she decided to go public, I said, okay, you want to go public with your little part? I'm going to go public with everything. Exactly. So guess what? I'm going to now use this in the court of public opinion. And every single interaction between you and I now is going to be on the internet because I'm going to now utilize the avenue that you tried to destroy me on. I'm going to now use it to turn it on you and embarrass you.
Negative social consequences.
Because now you're going to end up now basically reevaluating what you've done 6 prior times with men, if not more, as we're finding out. And it's like, okay, this is the only way I could teach her.
Yeah.
Because she won't stop any other way. So I have to fight fire with fire to hopefully get her to a point where she finally has a little trigger point where she goes, and the switch, flips, and she goes, okay, maybe I get it now, because she hasn't gotten it before. Yeah. So I'm like, and I used to feel guilty about that, but now when people send me that message, I don't respond unless I do respond and say, hey, you know what? I've tried other ways. This is the only way to do it.
Yeah. And usually, like, I don't usually go for like someone's looks, but if someone says you're a dirty thing and you're going to be lonely forever, I'm like, I hope you find happiness, because you clearly don't have that right now. And that's just the truth, right? I do think that we should have negative social sanctions for bad behavior. Yeah. And I think that going on people's pages and saying horrible things to them is negative behavior. And this idea that, no, we always need to take the high road. We always need to take the high road. I don't necessarily subscribe to that, nor do I think that that's the most effective way of combating this, right?
I agree with you. I think eye for an eye. I mean, that's the way I feel. It's like, if not that you have to implement that.
No. Whatever makes you feel good.
But if I choose to, there's nothing wrong with me doing that. If you've harmed me to a great degree, I can harm you to a great degree if I feel it's necessary. Because I need for what purpose? Okay, the purpose is to get a point across to stop you from doing this ever again.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, I think, morally wrong with that. But again, somebody will say there is. So it just is what it is.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
So, okay. So overall.
Yeah.
The final question I have, although we talked about so much, but I feel that I already kind of know the answer, but with everything you've done in your life, I mean, how's your mental health overall?
Honestly, really good. The time my mental health was the worst was when I was following the trajectory that other people had set for me. My parents, I grew up in a really, I guess, traditional Persian immigrant family. My dad's an engineer. My mom's a lawyer. They're like, all right, doctor, lawyer, engineer. What do you want to do? I was like, okay, I guess I'll do lawyer. And I was just going through the motions. Mm-hmm. I was in one of the most respected professions. And then I stopped and I was like, I don't like this. Every single day, what I'm going to wake up every time I hear my alarm for the next 40 years, I'm going to just be like, well, at least people like me. At least I'm in a well-respected profession. At least I can go out on the street and be like, I'm a lawyer. Like, that doesn't make me feel good when I put my head on my pillow. It just doesn't. Mm-hmm. So that was when I was the saddest. Like, it was like I was finishing law school when COVID hit. And I was like, fuck. Because I didn't mind school, but I was like, now I have to go into an office every single day and do this 9 to 5. And I know I'm not going to be happy that way, but stop being so crazy and dramatic. Like, it'll be fine. And then I was like, then like the opportunity came to me and I was like, you know what? Fuck everybody. Fuck everybody. This is my life. The only person that's going to be with me every day when I wake up and every day when I go to sleep for my life is myself. So I need to live life for myself. And the second I did that, stopped caring what people think, put myself out there on the internet, which is crazy, right? You don't see a lot of lawyers that do this. And I'm just so open about it. I'm like, yeah, if you look me up, you're going to see some wild shit, but I don't care. I don't care because I love my life. And now I have so much time, freedom, whatever I need to like make every day about me. I read more than I've ever read. My intellectual curiosity is still, right? It's so big. And now, not only that, now I have this platform where I can bring my interests to other people like you're doing with this podcast, taking opportunities you had and spinning it into what you want to share with people. Yeah. And so it's been so great for my mental health. I love that. So
you sound happier than you've ever been,
for sure.
Living more of an authentic life than you've ever lived. You have no shortage of people that you could choose to, be in a relationship with. Things are good. You have more money than you could probably ever need in a lifetime. So for all of those people
that enrages people, what you just said will enrage a lot of people.
And for them to hear that right now and realize that if they expect you to come crashing down from this pedestal that they believe you're on, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And that might be the one absolute that you probably can state.
That's true. And that the other absolute is their time would be much better served working on themselves and trying to reach their own happiness than just hoping that misery loves company and that, if people like you or people like me fall, they'll feel better. Yeah. Why don't you just rise yourself up instead?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. Jazmen, honestly, thank you so much for just the conversation today. I think, there was a few things that opened my eyes even more. I really do respect you as a person. And I think like the more times people have these conversations and listen to them, if I didn't know what you did and I just had this conversation sitting down with you as I've done prior, like, you're normal, you're a caring person, you want people to be happy, you stay in your own lane, you do your thing, but you're living an authentic life. And I think that energy, I mean, there's a reason I think why in the first place, we cross paths. I find that people that, a certain energy that I put out is what I receive back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've found to bring me a ton of happiness, is like when I don't have to hide and try to be, a medical sales rep or an NFL athlete, because that's what I think people are going to respect. But it's like, well, how about I get earrings? How about I start dancing? How about I start doing all these unorthodox creative things
I love that
at first pushed people away, but it started to attract the right energy to me. And now I'm like, I've never been happier. Like I'm still figuring stuff out.
Of course, yeah. No one's perfect.
But like I've never felt happier, and it's never felt easier to be me than in this moment. And so, I think that's why, again, what I found is like, as I've had people from all different walks of life come on in this podcast or just in my life and have conversations, it's like the common, theme that all these people, no matter what industry we're in, is that we're all open-minded. A lot of the people that I surround myself with, in fact, all of them are open-minded enough to be able to have the conversation, be willing to have the conversation. But like, they're just wanting to learn. They're like, hey, like at least if nothing else, we can agree to disagree, but like, I'm not going to get all fired up about it. You do what you do. And if you're happy, you're happy. And if I'm happy, I'm happy. And however we can grow together, great. Or if like, this is the end of the road, if you and I have a podcast and that's it, then like, great. Then like that impacted people for that time.
Exactly.
And then we move on and like that helps people out. And then we go do our things. Like at the end of the day, it's like, I'm brought together with people that make an impact when I am. And then if I'm brought together with them again, great. If I'm not, it doesn't have to be that. It's like, as long as I'm staying in my lane and doing my thing, like I'll continue to have a plethora of people that, that are vibrating on the same frequency.
And I do want to say one more thing. I think it's really important, especially now that we do start having more men who are doing this kind of content, who aren't mirroring that red pill alpha men versus women, doomed to whatever type of stuff, because I do think men need a good influence. And I commend you for having a podcast on mental health that a lot of time focuses, I think, on men, but everybody.
I opened it up because I didn't want to exclude women.
Yeah, exactly. Like everybody. Yes, even that.
I actually got a few bad reviews across different platforms. Be like, he's a men's rights activist. And I was like, that is the last thing I am. And I don't want that. So like, okay, because I'm not interviewing women, I was like, I always wanted women to be a part of this, but I wanted men to have a safe space. But then I was like, you know what? But I enjoy having this conversation with women. I get a lot of value out of having these conversations with women. So like, why can't I just I don't want to exclude them. And the second that it was perceived that way, I was like, you know what? I could continue to go down this path, but like, I don't want it to be perceived that way. It doesn't align with who I am.
Exactly.
And so if that's the way it's perceived, I'm going to pivot, because I don't have an ego in this.
And you don't want to feed that, especially I think men that are into fitness and are into health and have that, can be a masculine influence for other men that also don't like hate women and just want to rage against them. I think that's really, really important. So I really commend you with what you're doing. And I hope we get more voices like this to kind of drown out the very toxic men's rights activist spaces.
Yeah, I mean, women, listen, I love women. They sometimes get me into trouble, but it's more so I get myself into trouble, right? Like at the end of the day, I'm like, if the women were on this planet, I mean, first off, this species would cease to exist, but it also would be far less entertaining and far less incredible. And so I love these conversations, and I'm very grateful that, I got those negative comments. I was like, great, cool. Like I'm involving women now, and we're not going to feed into that, because this is my platform. This is what I want to convey.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
Jazmen, thank you so much for everything today. For those that want to continue to follow your journey, intrigued by whatever it is you're doing, whether they want to get to know you from one aspect or the other, where can they find you?
Yeah. So if you just go to Jazmen Jafar, JazmenJafar.me, that'll have all my socials. So if you're into like the OF stuff, if that's your vibe, you can go do that. But also like Instagram, I want to start up YouTube and do more like informative video essays on different topics that are interesting to me. So yeah, that will have all of my socials. So yeah, check it out.
Jazmen, thank you so much.
Thank you.